Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I was particularly disturbed by last month's GAO report, which detailed the comments of sailors from 16 different ships. And I think it's important to note one of the reasons the GAO went to sailor interviews so heavily was because of the lack of data and intermediate maintenance. And these sailors discussed their experiences, and basically they were discussing the same root problems that led to the disasters of 2017. We're 5 years away from that, as I mentioned. But I think we could go back as far as the Bilal report. I believe that was in 2010, and find similar themes and challenges as to what was now being reported in 2020 or 2022. So despite your actions, and I want to give credit for many of those actions, we're still receiving these troubling reports and comments from sailors reporting this, pointing at the same old problems. So there seems to be a disconnect between the initiatives and what we're hearing on the ground. Were you surprised, and to either one of you, were you surprised by what you were hearing from the sailors in that report?
Yeah, let me take that, and Roy, please pile on. I was not surprised, partly because of this journey I alluded to earlier about Navy taking a hard look at systemically weak performance is very much focused in two ways on shipyards and maintenance. What you highlighted as particularly troubling is absence of data is true. And in this case, I can, on an upside, report to you, that's in the intermediate phase now, and we're on it. That used to also be in the depot phase. It took 2 4-stars, myself and Admiral Caldwell, to break free the data in our public shipyards and get that released out of control so we can use it to drive this perform to plan, get real engine, which then becomes, it's married with our get better engine. So the GAO report talked about a number of issues. It talked about manning. Let me offer you a few thoughts on that. The Navy from Fitz-McCain era has recognized that as an issue, and the Navy's pulled that lever hard. But let's talk about why it was still manifest with those sailors. From January 17 to today, 10,000 more sailors at sea, 23,000 increase in end strength since 17, crew des billets being increased relentlessly, gaps at sea decreasing. Still, the way we approach, partly as a learning from Fitz-McCain, is we allocate risk in manpower to the maintenance phase. And so we have to be eyes wide open about that. And as we still continue to close the manpower lever, that's what Admiral Kitchener can talk about, how we manage that risk in the maintenance phase. The related element I would like to highlight is partly because of what I talked about in the recruiting context. We're not going to just solve this by recurringly pulling the more sessions lever. We need to be thoughtful about demand reduction. And I don't mean demand reduction in the context of Chairman Garamendi said about less COCOMs, although that is a lever we're pulling in, and so to make that a supply-based discussion we can talk about. But I'm talking about in terms of condition-based maintenance and using our data and our AI in a best practice, for example, that Maersk does, to design our maintenance system on the ship to not oversubscribe the sailors.
Not to jump in, just for the interest of time.
Yeah.
I am all for pulling in private sector best practices. But I have to tell you, the fact that we didn't have data at the depot level, we don't have data at the intermediate level, do you find that acceptable?
It's completely unacceptable, but Ranking Member, I can tell you, these initiatives broadly that we've been scaling for 4 years now are absolutely driving data. If you look in the aviation enterprise and what Airbus is doing, it's phenomenally impressive. The Fleet Readiness analytic group, and Roy has created a surface action analytics group that is completely data-driven. The shipyards now, the public shipyards, absolutely data-driven. Private shipyards, we need to work as well to make that richer. Intermediate maintenance, just as an example, we did use intermediate maintenance data in some of the earlier perform to plan initiatives in undersea and in the private shipyards. It's just not as rich as it needs to be. But Ranking Member, I would tell you there is no lack of understanding of the power of data. And the other thing I would like to highlight, we have an exceptional data scientist group at the Center for Naval Analysis that uses data in incredibly powerful ways. And in fact, when I benchmark personally with senior executives at world-class companies outside the DoD ecosphere in search of best practice for large velocity, high volume deck plate problem solving, when they see how the Navy has used large data to leverage and move outcome, they are the ones that are asked for the next meeting.